Welcome back to the Burnout Club, everyone. This is the place where we explore burnout and success, one expert and experiment at a time. I'm your host, Patrice Bonfiglio, and today I'm joined by Jeanne Hardy. She was a two-time founder of Creative Business Inc. and Levvy. Jeanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrice. It's great to be here. I really love this topic, and I feel like the more that we can discuss it in public and the open, the better for everybody. So thank you for building this podcast.
Oh, thank you. I knew I had to have you on the show too, because for the listeners, we met probably about a year and a half ago, but I saw her recently and she was talking about employees and their time in a different way than I've heard before. And I knew this conversation was bigger than the two of us and everyone can benefit. So why don't you give us a little idea about your businesses, Creative Business Inc. and Levvy and the background?
Sure. So I started Creative Business Inc., which is an outsourced accounting and advisory firm. So we do bookkeeping, CFO advisory for creative, fast-growing creative businesses like e-commerce and architecture and SaaS companies. Over the years, I grew that company pretty steadily and the team was growing. We had people from all different ages and backgrounds working with us. It was a really dynamic office. And then around 2017, 2018, I started to feel a lot of friction happening in the office. It was, burnout, and the team, they were young, they were working, but the complexity of the work had changed. From that point of view, I started looking into, why this is happening. Is this common across other industries, in other workplaces? Was it the technology we were using? Was it the architecture, our org chart? And all the work and all the conversations that I had during that time really led me to build my other company, Levvy, which is a practice management tool. And that's kind of where I did a deep dive into what it feels like to work for our firm and why, what's triggering these overwhelming, breakdowns where people get burnt out and leave and feel like they just can't do this work anymore.
I love the terminology that you wanted to feel what it was like to be a client of your own firm. I don't know if everyone does that, but it's probably a good exercise. So everyone make a note. So what was that like? Like, how did you actually dive in and put yourself in the client's shoes?
Well, it was, I was really focused on actually my employees and what they were doing first and kind of understanding where their burnout was coming from. These were young people and they would say, I'm really burnt out. And then I would turn around and be like, it's 5:05 and no one's, it's just like, what am I not getting right? Accounting, firm is traditionally kind of a hard driving business to be in, but we were really focused on these creative clients and we really wanted it to be a modern, very, kind of future of work type culture where we, had a lot of vacation and really valued, people's personal time, but they were still burning out. And so that was kind of the concern. So I figured, if this is happening to me, talking with the companies that I was working with, are you seeing the same thing on your side? And they were. So it seemed to me it was worth looking into.
Yeah. You're so ahead of the curve because you're saying 2017, 2018?
Yeah.
Like we haven't even gotten to COVID yet. So you're addressing this problem of the employees feeling burnout despite having great policies on paper, it seems like.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And trying to talk about it a lot, in our daily lives. It's interesting because it kind of started when companies started moving much more quickly to a digital solution for every single thing that they do, right? So everybody, we work across dozens of software because we have to as accountants with our clients, we do their bookkeeping. So we're in all their accounting systems. That was a lot of what was driving the burnout. And when I was doing my research, there was, a number of really interesting articles and studies that Deloitte and Gartner had done on this idea of complexity of work, that work had become so complex that it actually started hurting workers as opposed to making them feel supported by technology, right? So that has made it into the vernacular of today that too much technology is not a good thing and actually hasn't delivered on its promise of, creating smoother workflows and making things more efficient. A lot of times technology on its own is creating most of the bottlenecks in business. So, and that's frustrating. It's so fast forward to 2020 when we went 100% remote and the whole world, went 100% remote. It was even further exacerbated by the additional technology that was layered onto their work. And I just started noticing, people were really having, they were struggling for a lot of reasons, but even post-COVID, seeing how that tech pileup really made work less efficient, and the context switching was really exhausting people. Logging in and out of all these different systems all day long, kind of losing the thread. So this overall sort of lack of focus that was driven by the processes was really contributing a lot to people feeling exhausted and kind of burnt out.
That's so relatable because your day is so disjointed. Totally. I can't even tell you how many platforms I'm logging in. I know. Just get everything done. So it's like agnostic to industry, really. There's just so much technology.
It is agnostic. I know. And we don't even realize it, but for an example that I always give people, we used to run a payroll, typical, straightforward, business operation, running your payroll. And it would take about 15 minutes to run a payroll. Now it takes, it could take over an hour, but you're logging into 6 different portals and apps in order to run the payroll. Like that workflow requires like 6 or 8 different passwords. And while it seems really efficient to have everything cloud-based, they're not connected. So you're right. The disjointedness is makes it hard for people to learn. It makes it hard for people to connect the dots. They spend a lot of time bouncing around and not really using their judgment. So they, become over-reliant on step 1, step 2, step 3. So really sort of removes the context around the work, makes it hard for people to kind of rise above it and start using their judgment during working.
Yeah. And I, to just focus in on accounting, because that's how I got my start too. I think it's so easy in accounting because there's all the numbers and you're very task oriented, but you have to have the employees try almost not to be that accountant, but act like the auditor, right? There should be things happening, but you still need that thought process. So I spot on. Everything you're saying is spot on.
Just thinking about knowledge workers, it's the knowledge part that we're trying to access from our employees, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to give us. And then we put all these layers of technology and process in front of them and their work or between them and the firm. And then they start to feel really frustrated. I've heard employees say, nobody can see me. I feel like I'm working in Siberia. I send an email to get some help and I'm spinning my wheels for 30 minutes, waiting for a reply, trying to deliver work and having the technology not really help facilitate that. People start to think like, I'm never going to get this promotion. They can't see me. It's really interesting when people feel like they're kind of behind the screen and they don't have an idea of how their work is being perceived, on their, on the company side. And employers really need to think about how it feels to work for our companies. How does the technology feel? What we're putting in front of people, like we're asking them to spend their whole day on, how does that actually feel for them? Do they feel seen? Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? And really opening up the conversation, try to get them to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. And I think you're right in that you have to open the conversation, because there's been plenty of times where if I directly ask, like, do you think the software is working? Do you think it's the best thing that we can be using for this particular process? And a lot of times the answer is no. Like, it's slow, there's issues exporting, or it doesn't, jive correctly with something else, or I feel like this actually slows me down. I could do it so much faster, a different way, but this is, what I thought we were supposed to be doing. So yeah, asking the question, absolutely step one.
Yeah. And like monitoring the bug reports, or having that centralized, I think is really important too. Like if you're introducing new technology, you need to have an open channel, like a Slack channel or some kind of open channel where you as the owner, and, maybe even open it up to the whole firm, so that people can start reporting what's not working for them. And sometimes it's a bug, but sometimes it's just they're not using the product the right way. They missed the instructions on how to do that, right? Both things feel super frustrating for the person who's actually trying to get something done.
Yeah. There's no worse feeling than like when you have to open a ticket and you're like, I don't even know, like maybe I missed the window of when someone's going to respond.
Exactly. Or like, this isn't even a bug or something, right? You don't even know.
Yeah.
But as an owner, knowing what's going through that channel, I think is also really illuminating, because it sees, people reporting bugs is actually a sign of engagement with the system. They're trying to find a solution. So you want to like welcome that and help that, help those things get resolved. But it's an interesting time, I think, because we're moving into AI, automation, the same thing. AI is amazing. It's an amazing technology, especially for accounting. It's fantastic, but it also could end up creating a lot of silos, a lot of misunderstanding around work, things like that we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Still many different AI systems that are disjointed again. And I think I'm going to change how I approach, like the whole bug conversation we were just having. I feel like I have a really structured process for having employees report on it when we are going through the integration phase and maybe immediately after, but not continuously. But there's always new things that pop up. So that should be an ongoing process, and I should have visibility into that. So I'm going to make a change because of you. Thank you.
I would have never known that unless I had built a software product myself, because that this whole idea of edge cases. So the more users that are on there, the more data that's in there, the more people are using in slightly different ways, right? They'll approach part of and you actually can't account for every single edge case. But what's interesting is when you do keep that going, work is always changing, right? So there's always going to be new bugs or new bottlenecks somewhere. And I think doing it continuously is probably something that not many people do. I think they're like, great, we've implemented it. Let's wrap it up. Like, we're good.
Success.
And, not knowing where the problems are, because it could actually be a different software that was implemented along the line too. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy moment for businesses, because if they're not big enough and they don't have like a dedicated IT team, they're kind of putting these tech stacks together themselves, right? And trying to manage it. But that's I like that continuously. I would definitely encourage people to do that just for their own benefit.
Yeah, there's really no downside at all. So tell me more about Levvy. So what made you start Levvy, or like, what is it solving?
So Levvy is a practice management platform
Mm-hmm.
It solves the problem of visibility, which is one of the number one issues when you're working in, a professional services firm working across multiple clients.
Mm-hmm.
There's multiple people from your firm, either internally or even external people, stakeholders that come on board for these particular engagements, client engagements. So, for example, in accounting, you might have a bookkeeper, you might have a CFO working with a client, you might have an outside CPA, there might be an offshore team. So at any moment, 3 or 4 people could be working on that client, during that week, or with even in one workflow, they could be working together. And what we were seeing in our world was that the more complex the client, the more siloed the stakeholders were. And how could we, which means that they're learning things about the client in different ways at different times and not actually sharing that back to the rest of the group.
Yeah.
So how do we centralize the client knowledge and at the same time have the technologies incentivize people to keep putting that client knowledge in the system? So that really informed how we built Levvy, which is, it is a centralized system. It unifies the whole firm with its workflows and the platform workspaces. But what happens on the work stream side is it's a place to capture all of that client knowledge, like going right from the beginning, right from the engagement, the discovery calls, all the way through. Because in our line of business, professional services, these are not projects. These are engagements that go year over year over year, right? And to capture how an engagement changes with a client over the course of several years is one of the most valuable assets that a firm could capture, right? And hold on to for training.
That's huge.
Yeah. And no system actually has places to capture that context. There's like a CRM over here, and then you have your workflow here, and then you have your time tracking and invoicing, in this other system. What Levvy does is it brings all of that together. And so everybody's working from the same information, and, all the client knowledge is together. The time tracking is there, which means that capacity and planning are there. And that was one of the things that we had talked about was employees' understanding of their expectation for work being very different than what actual work, the work is, right? And trying as an owner to sort of manage that gap, meaning you're assigning a lot of work, but you're not over scheduling people. How do you know, and how do they know that right? So how transparent is that system of capacity management so that your team actually knows what's expected of them and how much time those things are expected to take, so they can gauge if there's an issue that they should bring someone in to help them address, right?
Yeah.
And so what Levvy does is it creates visibility across all of those aspects of work in one place. So the employee can always, and managers can always get a really good context around what the expectation for them is and how they're doing.
Yeah, I think the capacity aspect to it, it's such a big deal, because as the client, it's really frustrating when you feel like everything's put out there in the discovery call, or you've been a client for years already, and then the capacity is just not matching what we need delivered, right? And you don't know where it's going wrong. And a lot of times companies are very opaque about how they're assigning things on the back end. What's been the response to that aspect of the solution?
Well, it's funny because initially we were a little worried that people would feel like it was Big Brother, because when you start a task, you have the time starts tracking. Right from the get-go, you don't have to be tracking your own time and saying how you spent your time during the day. Levvy is doing that automatically for you.
Oh, nice.
And then it's reporting that to, the timesheets. One of the interesting outcomes for that was that the employees actually liked it. They actually liked to see, number one, what was the estimated time that the work was supposed to take. So it's assigned and it's given an estimate, right? They like that. And then knowing that they're tracking time in the work, they actually didn't mind because it was helpful to them to know if there was something wrong with the work process itself, right? Like they were able to kind of gauge, like, is this realistic or not? If it's not realistic, I know how to address it now. Now I have data to address it with my manager to say, I don't, this isn't working out. The other part that Levvy has is it kind of has this like radical transparency where the team members can see their teammates' time as well. And I know that sounds really crazy, but kind of understanding where everybody else is too.
Yeah.
I think that helps adjust the expectation issue.
Oh, yeah.
The expectation from the reality, right? Their perception of I have too much. But when they actually look at the hours that the work is estimated to take, we never budget over 32 hours just because there's a lot of inbound stuff, ad hoc work.
Yeah.
And, but some weeks they might have 26 hours scheduled, right?
Yeah.
But they might feel totally overwhelmed that I have so much work, I'm never going to get it done. And having that, but management's like, I don't understand. Help me understand. I'm not seeing it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Is actually kind of a fantastic conversation to have, right? Like,
yeah. You're just starting from like a very clean place where you really are trying to understand because there's already visibility and data there. This makes so much sense.
Like, take me through this, right? It's so much more productive. And I think the team learns a lot in that conversation. They also, start to think about their role and their communication to managers. And then management actually has some really solid things to talk about, right? They're really based like, this took you, in this client, this process took 4 hours, which was great. But this one's taking you, 6 hours. And, help me understand what's going on here. Is it a client side inefficiency that we need to address with the client? I don't know about you, but a lot of employees that I've worked with and even the firms, they're not always very vocal about what they need.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe because they don't know if what they want is, is available to them. But I think it also helps them kind of speak up and advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I think it is. I see it all the time where an employee is somewhat agreeable, right? So they'll just kind of like push through and like, oh, this is just such a time suck. We should be addressing this, whether it's our side or their side. It should be a conversation and we should know whether we can do something about it or not. So yeah, and I love that you're removing the kind of like animosity within the conversations that can occur where someone just feels attacked. Like you're talking about numbers and how to solve to make, those hours kind of match or make sure their schedule is on point versus you are just having a problem meeting, your workload. You're arming both parties with good information, which is much more helpful.
It's like two-way accountability. And I think that really brings the pressure down because as an employee, if you know that your manager has your capacity in real time, can see, what your utilization and capacity and have that be changing in real time. Yeah. So if you got caught in 2 very long meetings, that capacity is changing in real time. It's reporting to your manager, like, if she's getting underwater here, what, check in, right? I think that sets up a lot of teams for success, knowing that that their manager is not going to overschedule them, knowing that they can see. So is very comforting.
Yeah.
And it also puts the manager on, creates accountability for the manager, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't overschedule me. And that's like the other, that's the, because it's going to be on you because you have the data to know better than to do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
One of the biggest problems that I hear in professional services firms is that the best employees are the ones that are routinely overscheduled. Because they could handle it. And the week, you have this great project, this great client that comes in and you want to give it to your best person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, the low performers are underscheduled because nobody trusts to get them, So having a tool like Levvy really makes that very clear and obvious. That's why their best people walk out the door because they're like, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I that is what was happening in my firm. So from learning the hard way really made me question, how we're thinking about managing people's capacities and workloads and how we're messaging that to them so that they were always reminded that, we care about you. We care about how you feel. We care about you not feeling overburdened or burnt out, and we want to give you support.
Yeah. It's like a burnout detection tool.
Right.
This is great. And I talk to people all the time that say, I have 8 hours of back-to-back meetings. How am I supposed to get any work done? And this would really flag that as an issue, right? Because if it is in real time changing the workload capacity, it becomes undeniable that something isn't quite working in how things are being planned out and scheduled. So I think it's great all around. And just going back to your earlier point, when you were saying it's kind of the central repository, I was thinking about my workflows and how I have to repeat the same thing to multiple vendors that are kind of working on different chains of the workflow. So to not have to do that like every day or every time something happens would be a huge relief, right? Like, what a waste of time to be kind of like sharing the same information multiple times. So we definitely, we have to talk after that.
And when people stop doing it, then people I don't have time to do this all day long. Yeah. It's really, it's kind of interesting to think about how we can all kind of walk our own factory floors, right? Like sit in that seat and, and as an owner, if you're frustrated, you can only imagine.
Yeah.
How you're
on the ground level. Yeah. So thank you for walking me through. We went like super detailed on a lot of these points, but I think it's amazing that it's so automated and that it doesn't put the burden of tracking all this on the employee, because then that's just one more thing. And then it's not likely to be accurate either, right? Because they'll shave off some hours to make it look better or pad it. But what about you as the CEO, right? How do you deal with your own, just like the scale of what you're creating and preventing burnout?
To be honest, if I had known, if I had known what it would be like, I probably would not have done it.
Yeah.
So building an outsourced accounting firm, where it's very customer centric, employees are very people, and I love every minute of it. It's super energizing. And then building a software company, so completely different that it was a huge learning curve. It continues to be like a big learning curve, learning like at the speed of light, because, every conversation early on, you realize I know nothing. I know anything. I don't know what these people are talking about, and it's going to be good.
Yeah. That's a great point, right? You think like, okay, you've already created a successful business, right? I can do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, I can run a business, but I'm lucky that at Levvy, what was really fun is that the team that we have at Levvy is super sensational. So working with these really brilliant people and working on this project has been a joy because I've learned so much from them, but it's very different than my experience at Creative Business where, we have a lot of training and we have people at different levels. And, so like a lot of ideas are generated, by myself and my management team. But on the Levvy side, really what this team is bringing to Levvy after the initial MVP has just been incredible. So that's a lot of fun working with, it's great. Make sure that you build a team that is totally dedicated, but also super wonderful to work with and brilliant.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to find those great people. But the pressure is also, I'm a woman, I'm not 30. And being in this world of technology where it's also very social, but there's raising money, and meeting investors, networking. And then there's also, getting out there and meeting the accounting firms and, advisory firms that we're selling to. It's a lot. It's like a constant pressure, to be delivering and just to keep things going, right? Like we've got to keep selling to keep things going. I got to keep having conversations. I got to keep meeting people because, there really is, there's a lot of pressure at multiple places. Your users are, they need you to be available to them, especially in early days. So yeah, I had no idea it would be this difficult. Also, when I started the company, it was like the VC, it was like the height of the VC days where money was raining from the trees. And even as a female founder, I thought, well, how hard could this be? I'm the subject matter expert. Like I can totally build this thing in my sleep. I know what I want. And now how quickly that environment changed too. And that's very stressful being like, oh my God, no one's raising money anymore. Like no.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's a serious conversation. You bring up the fact that you're a woman, and I just realized, I think a year ago, women only get 2% of VC funding, right? And as VC funding is drying up, right, that the pot's getting smaller. So that is a real source of burnout, right? Trying to raise capital.
Yeah, I mean, especially when we think like in the US, I think it was like $33 billion of capital was raised and women got less than 2%.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the numbers are not great. So as a side project, I'm trying to change that. But so we'll connect after this. And maybe that's a whole other episode for a podcast. But no, it's great that you're talking about it and sharing it because you have an idea that's just like a slam dunk and you're still having a hard time. It's a conversation that we need to keep having as well.
Yeah. We have customers, the products in the market, and it's still a lot of work. As a founder, I think that, as a business owner and it's very different. So the business owner, like once you kind of get things going and your business starts talking to you and you start to see, you start to understand what it needs and how to keep it growing. With technology, it's really different. It's, starting something these days, and maybe it is just starting, maybe it really is just starting the business at this time is very different than when I started Creative Business back in 2005. The challenges are really different. It's the financial pressure is much higher than it was back, for that business, because you're basically spending ahead of your earnings. And so that's why keeping investor conversations are going. So as a person, you're taking all that pressure on and it feels really negative. It seems like everybody's winning, but you're not. It's hard to not feel like you're doing something terribly wrong.
Yeah. What you need is like Levvy for fundraising, right? So you can see how everyone else is doing, because you're probably not that off. I think just like the whole market for raising capital is different.
You're always feeling like, you're in, I guess that's just, that sort of entrepreneurship too, that how am I doing and why is it so much harder than I thought it was going to be? I always tell business owners that I work with on the financial side, if you're going to start a business, you got to take a really long view of it, like 20 years out. You can't you can't start a business and think I'm going to do this for 5 years and then I'm going to sell it and move on. You can say like, I would be open to that. But when you're planning your business, when you're actually making decisions about your business, you really need to think about it make decisions for a very long time horizon.
That's a great point.
It takes so long to make those changes in your business. It takes a long time for them to actually happen, right? To actually take hold, really make the change that you're looking for. And I think that, even business cycles and market cycles, you just don't know. You could have a moment where you lose 2 really good employees. It's going to take some, so if you think really long term, you can kind of plan for the ups and downs. With technology, you can't. It's like you really, it's very short term.
Like 30-day cycles.
Yeah, which is really very different and super stressful, to get used to.
Yeah. But that's a good point to hammer home, though, about needing to be super long term when you're planning it, right? Because it's so much easier. Like if an exit comes your way and it's great, perfect, take it. And just, note for all the listeners that you actually have run a business successfully for that long. So, you come from a place where you know what you're talking about. Now, I was very interested to find out how you found your brilliant employees at Levvy. Like, what is that process like? Because that seems really difficult to find great employees for a business that's starting out.
Honestly, everybody that I ended up hiring were introduced to me. So I used my network. I networked to meet my early employees and met people through other people. So it could be in angel groups that I was a part of. So the Fourth Floor or the Fourth Effect it's a group here in New York. Just talking with people, talking with investors, talking with other technologists, and talking with even accounting firms, trying to tap into their networks to find people. And it was important because we're selling to accountants. So having some frame of reference, some experience with how it works in an accounting firm, right?
I agree with you. Yeah.
Like the personality, the pressure, the deadlines, again, if you look at like a creative agency or you look at an architecture firm or, you look at you look at a SaaS company, the mindset and the focus is on completely different things, meaning that they're not as deadline driven as accounting is, like do whatever it takes, because they aren't flexible. It's not like, delivering something a bit late is not, nobody wants to do that. But sometimes deadlines get extended for projects. In accounting, no, they don't.
Yeah, you cannot miss your deadline.
You have to you have to run payroll. You've got to get the reports to the board meeting. Spending some time in that world was really important to me, to have people around me that actually understood it. And then also my CTO, who I met him through Y Combinator. They had a CTO matching program. And what I loved about him, and this might be advice to people that are starting to do technology, is I met a lot of really talented engineers that were excited about Levvy and doing exciting stuff themselves. I really appreciated that. But what they didn't have is they didn't have the business acumen that I needed in a partner. I think like innovation and, having that adventurous spirit is fantastic, but businesses have real constraints, especially in the beginning. And I needed somebody who understood the business constraints, the practical business constraints of running a business so that we wouldn't be butting heads all the time during the development process. So, I think that that's something to take into account too, is like know your strengths and hire for your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Make sure, if you're someone who's really worried about cash flow or sales or what, make sure you're hiring somebody who shares those concerns.
That's great foresight too. Like with your comments on just say having the wonderful brain to come up with all of the innovation, but if you're not like anchored in how to run a business, like period over period, then that just makes your life more difficult. So very good advice there. Yeah. What about like something that you're looking forward to? Like what is ideal for you for the future? And it could be with your businesses, it could be personal, it could be for the world, whatever you want.
I love working with business owners. I really do, especially, creative innovators. And I also love the idea of people who are really good at what they do, have been doing it for 10 plus years, I know it sounds, but building technology to work with in those industries.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when companies that I worked with had built their own technology.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they had their own ERPs. And if they needed something to be automated, they would do it themselves, right? They would hire their engineers and they would just build it themselves. They would add on this new module to their, the ERP. I think that the kind of generalization of industry software has some flaws. And I think people who work in these industries have this subject matter expertise that engineers crave when they're working on these projects. So I feel like even on an industry level, I would love to champion more people getting into the building solutions side, trying to encourage people to give that a shot. And I'm excited about the future because I feel like with AI, the emerging, AI, the potential for that seems even better.
Yeah, it's a reality that we might see. I haven't thought about software the way that you just said it, but you're so right. Like I remember all the proprietary systems, right? It got really crazy or you're just like piling things on top of each other. But I mean, you were tailoring it to exactly what you needed. And everyone that built those systems and used those systems is still in the business, right? So let's tap into the expertise and do it in an easier, faster way with AI. I'm all for that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, AI kind of, being able to build and code and build and to do these little pilots and see if it actually works it's so cheap and fast, and you can really test your ideas pretty easily. So
yeah.
And I think that's also a way of kind of moving up, kind of elevating our workforces above AI to say, look, now that it's here and you don't have to focus so much on this other stuff, like let's think more big picture about what we really need, like give me your feedback and let's try to build a solution for it.
Yeah.
And I think utilizing, like you said, people when you actually ask them, like, how's it working for you? And they're like, that's not, it's really not working.
Like, I hate it.
You know, imagine harnessing all of that feedback and building like something that, would take away all that friction. That could be pretty powerful. So yeah,
absolutely
excited about that. I think there's a lot that can be, in terms of your work life, can be improved if we're using AI to remove friction from, the stuff it can't just be another software that gives us a headache, that fits on everything else and gets in the way. Yeah. But it could use it to help build bridges and softwares and make it better.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh, you've been so generous with your time. Is there anything that you want to say to the listeners before we wrap?
Yeah, I mean, stay, again, if you're running a business or you're leading a business, stay as close to the team and the systems. And I think a lot of what people are suffering through is a technology problem, is a process problem, and not necessarily the work. And I really believe that people truly want to love their jobs. They want to love what they're doing, and they want to make an impact. So being really focused on clearing the friction away from their, from whatever impeding them, remove it, is a very worthwhile project to undertake.
That's a great point. People do want to love their jobs, right? So
they do. They really do. Yeah.
Yeah. If we lead with that, we'll get completely different answers, I think.
They really want to with their job, but it's so disruptive. It's such a hassle, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
So true. Great advice. Thank you, Jeanne. This
you.
is wonderful. If any of the listeners want to reach out to you, I'm sure you will welcome them. And you can reach out to Jeanne or myself for any follow-ups. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Burnout Club. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.